Namaste everyone, and welcome to the third part in this series on Karma Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. And just as for those who are joining us for the first time, I would encourage you, perhaps after listening to this live broadcast, to go back and have a look at the previous two talks that we did in the series, because what they do is lay a foundation for the understanding that we're going to speak about. In the first talk, we looked at understanding karma, and then looking at, is karma avoidable? And now we're going to deal more on the topic of karma yoga. And karma yoga has been a path to true happiness. So one of the things that we've come to understand is that action, or karma, binds us to this material world. We're bound in two principal ways. One is a karmic reaction that we must accept and experience at some point. And the second part is that activity conditions us again and again to engage in activity. The more that we desire and act on desire, the more we become conditioned by the false idea that, for instance, that we can actually find complete happiness and fulfillment in this world, that this world is actually my home, that I can find love and perfection here. And it is absolutely not true. The nature of the material world is that it is temporary, it is passing. My life in this particular body has a beginning and it will have an end. I will leave the body and I will move on. If I have accumulated the fruits of actions, karmic fruit, I must experience that going forward in another body. And the more I become conditioned by material conception, the more I will be very much attached to this world and experiences related to this world. So the Vedas introduce a really interesting idea that action binds us to this world, but action can also liberate us. That's quite extraordinary. It's a principle that's often seen in Ayurvedic medicine and homeopathic medicine, this idea that the thing that causes a disease or a dysfunction in the body, if it is applied in another way, can also become a cure. And that same principle exists in relation to karma. So in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 11th verse, it states that the yogis, abandoning attachment, act with their body, mind, and intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. So this is really now an introduction to what karma yoga is really all about. That it is possible to engage, to live a life of activity, and what may appear to anybody outside to be the same activity as everybody else, and yet to be living a life and acting in a way that purifies me from material attachment, brings me to a transcendental platform or condition. And the thing that's going to make the difference of whether action binds me or action liberates me, karma binds me or liberates me, is going to be my intent and purpose for acting. So, speaking of karma yoga, these two words, karma, of course, we've discussed and understood what it means, hopefully. Yoga There are some people that say yoga only refers to a particular one of what's called the darshans, or the schools of philosophical idea or philosophical approach, the yoga system. But there was a greater Vedic understanding that is held and promoted from time immemorial, that yoga refers to this union, the union between the living being and the supreme being. And it speaks about learning to live in perfect harmony. The fact that we are not living a harmonious life causes so much disruption and anxiety. We have tendencies, we have deep spiritual needs, the need for happiness, the need to love, to both love and to be loved, are part of our spiritual nature. When we have a proper understanding of this world, what should my relationship be with this world? What should my relationship be with other living beings? My relationship with a supreme being? When I understand these clearly, and I live this life of harmony that has to do with my true spiritual nature, then I can come to the platform of true happiness. So now, this verse in the 5th chapter, the 10th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, it says that one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme, that is, unto God, who is not affected by sinful action, just as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. I don't know if any of you have seen an actual lotus leaf. And if you drop water on it, it's really amazing. The water immediately, you put a little bit of water, it immediately forms like a sphere, a drop of water. And if the lotus leaf is vibrating in the wind or moving, the water rolls around on it. And the lotus leaf itself is untouched, unlike when I put water on clothing or something and it becomes absorbed into it. So it is in this example, a wonderful example is used, that it is possible for a person, even while embodied, living within this world, to have this relationship with the world, with material nature, which is like the drop of water on a lotus leaf. Yes, there is some contact, but the contact is almost non-existent, in that this water can roll, anywhere on the surface of the leaf. It doesn't leave anything behind. It is not really affected by the lotus leaf, nor is the lotus leaf affected by the water. So it's with this idea of being able to live in a way where you're not building deep attachment to material things. How is that possible? It's possible because what you're doing in this yoga process, the karma yoga process, is developing a higher taste, another kind of experience, that when you have it, what we would call lower tastes are no longer attractive. You're able to move away from things spontaneously, not like, I have to try and renounce this, I have to give up these things. They just lose their attraction. And one of the ways that this happens is by this process of learning to make a profoundly deep and spiritual offering of your activities and your life to the Supreme, to God. A couple of verses later, it states that the steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me. This is Krishna speaking. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled in this world. So here we've got sort of like two positions. Someone that's very greedily attached to the fruits of labor, who is engaged in activity in this world with a really strong desire to get something of it, and something I can taste and enjoy and become immersed in. And of course the understanding is, yes, you may have that experience, but the flavor that you get from it will not be completely satisfying. It will not be completely fulfilling. It will leave you hankering for more. Whereas on the other hand, you've got a person who is in a transcendental position where they're not attached to the outcome of their work. They're engaged in work both as a duty, a responsibility that we must perform, and in a mood of devotion. There is this deep spiritual offering of my work and my undertakings. Then the question is, well, is there anything in between? How do you move from this position to that position? And the reality is that it is a gradual process of transformation. This gradual process of transformation is fundamentally karma yoga. People may ask, well, what is the difference between karma yoga, the yoga of action, and bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion? Since you're talking about a devoted soul, you're talking about offerings. And it's fundamentally like this. Actually, from a higher perspective, one does not try to make any boundaries that this is clearly, bam, karma yoga here and bhakti yoga here. No, there is no clear boundary. There is a transition that occurs. Karma yoga can actually be considered non-different from bhakti yoga, even though in a beginning a person may still have some desire to benefit materially in terms of experience or whatever from the activities that they're engaged in. But if they learn to perform those activities with a sense of duty and responsibility, and they are doing it as an offering to the Supreme, then what happens is, even though I may be attached to some of that fruit and I want to experience the benefit of that action, I am still progressively being purified by this action, and it will come to the point where I no longer desire to enjoy the fruit of my work. And why and how does that happen? It's not an artificial thing where you make up your mind suddenly. It's like trying to give up smoking, and you've kind of like, you went from 1 pack a day and you're down to 3 cigarettes a day, and you kind of get it down to 1. Then you get really attached to that 1 time a day when you're smoking that 1 cigarette, and you're thinking, my God, how am I going to make the break here? You know. It's not like that, the idea that you're trying to give something up, the attachment to trying to enjoy the fruits of your work. But what's happening is you are moving, and as you move down the spiritual path, you are beginning to experience a joyfulness, a happiness that comes from being able to serve. This nature of it is part of our eternal spiritual nature to serve. You know, I read one time the Dalai Lama said that if people want to become happy in this world, you need to do 2 things. One is you need a purpose in life, and you need to serve. It's quite an extraordinary statement. But it is a fact. If you go out and you selflessly make a contribution of your time or whatever to do something for others, whether it's in, some food bank place, or you go to an old age home and you're helping out. If you engage, and I know people in some religious communities, they really encourage their kids. Families will take their kids once a month or twice a month or 3 or 4 times a month. They will go and perform some charitable activity where they help others. And what it does, people experience, it feels really good. Even if I see some bum on the street, and I think, well, I shouldn't help them. They're probably drug addicts. They're probably drunks and everything. I shouldn't contribute to their delinquency. Well, that may be a fact. You could go and buy something for them to eat if you felt like that. But even if you give some money, the mere fact of giving somebody something who is in a position that is less than your own, you experience joy from it. You experience happiness. It's putting you in touch with your eternal spiritual nature. So when we learn, through the process of karma yoga, it arouses this deep spiritual nature that it's actually really nice to do nice things for others, to serve others, and to serve the Lord of my own heart, my greatest friend, my most intimate friend. When I cultivate this friendly and relationship that is overflowing with devotion, and I am seeking to simply see the happiness of others, I am becoming less self-centered and more selfless, which is more of a spiritual condition. And in that journey, it begins to awaken my true spiritual nature. And this transition is spoken about. I mean, Krishna and the Vedas, it's not like they make these hard things. Okay, that's that. And then if you want to move to that, bam, you've got something there. Bam, you've got something there. In the 12th chapter, there are like 3 verses where Krishna speaks to Arjuna about, it's not a question of higher, what is lower. It is this warm and encouraging journey that people take that can progressively help them come to appreciate and experience their own true spiritual nature. So in the 12th chapter, 10th verse, Krishna says, if you cannot practice the regulations associated with the path of bhakti or bhakti yoga, then try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. If, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness, then just try to act, giving up the results or all the results of your work, and try to become self-situated, more stable, not just pulled everywhere. If you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. This is spiritual understanding. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation. And better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation one can attain peacefulness of mind. There's this whole different understanding in relation to the Vedas, that rather than chasing endless desire that arises in your mind and senses and thinking that you can become peaceful and happy by constantly feeding the desires and thoughts and ideas that you have, when a person becomes more self-situated and is engaged in more spiritual activity and is less engaged in simply chasing desire everywhere, automatically you will become more peaceful. If you are constantly chasing desire in a search for happiness, you will not be peaceful. You will be more disturbed. So, jumping to the second chapter, like I said, we're taking verses from different parts of the Gita and trying to put it together to try and explain this process so you can understand. In the second chapter, 48th verse, Krishna says, "Be steadfast in yoga, O Arjuna. Perform your duty, abandon all attachment to success or failure. Such evenness of mind is called yoga. A man engaged in this devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions, even in this life. Therefore strive for yoga, O Arjuna, which is the art of all work. The wise, engaged in devotional service, take refuge in the Lord and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of actions in the material world. In this way they can attain the state beyond all miseries." So this condition, and we're jumping over a lot of things here, we're moving quite quickly through this idea. You need to perhaps review what we've discussed and spend time over the next days or weeks considering, maybe rehearing and contemplating these ideas. The way in which a person comes to this state of not just peacefulness but great spiritual joy, and the way in which true spiritual love awakens within the heart, is when we move from the idea of even just making an offering of our actions with a desire that we become purified and maybe experience a purified result. What we will be moving towards is this idea of simply becoming both pleasing to the Lord of our heart, Lord Paramatma, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, and being pleasing to others by this mood of service. And the way in which one is encouraged to do this, in the 9th chapter, the 27th verse, Krishna tells Arjuna, "O son of Kunti, all, not some or most, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering unto me." Where a person comes to this point, the song, "Every breath I take, every move I make," actually it should be done as an offering. My entire life becomes an offering, a spiritual offering. And it awakens in me this amazing joy that comes from simply being pleasing to the Lord and being pleasing to all other living beings. In this way you will become freed from all reactions to good and evil deeds, and by this principle of renunciation you will be liberated and come to me. So this is the perfection of karma yoga. And if we understand this process, we understand that whether one is cultivating knowledge or jnana yoga, this is for the purpose of understanding really how to live and to how to act. If we engage our activity and our life in a sense of duty, being unattached, then we become spiritually purified. We're not bound by karmic reaction as much. But when we actually make an offering of this to the Supreme, the Lord of our heart, and to other living beings, and we live our life in a mood of devotion and service, then we can attain a true transcendental position, become truly liberated, experience divine spiritual love that we all desire, and attain a position of happiness that is unimaginable. It cannot be compared to any material experience. It is what we desire and seek. This is full self-realization and God-realization through this process. So I hope that you will excuse my personal deficiencies in trying to communicate this wonderful transcendental truth, and overlooking my own defects in presenting this. Try to contemplate upon this message and consider it. I can promise and guarantee you that if you apply this spiritual process in your life, you will attain this condition of spiritual perfection, of tremendous, unbounded joy and happiness, and experience profound spiritual love. Thank you very much for joining us. There have been quite a few questions that have been coming in, and the audience here has some questions, so we will probably definitely do at least one more in the series where we will try to address these questions. Thank you very much. So before ending, we will just chant again. I'm going to chant the mantra Om Hari Om. And as before, I will lead the kirtan, chanting it twice, and ask that you, or invite you to join with me, submerge yourself in this purifying transcendental waters of the holy spiritual sound. Thank you.